Hi, my name is James Nomas. I'm 40 years old, and it's April of 2016. Um, I've lived with depression all my life. I've come to realize that when I was very young, as a defense mechanism to keep myself from getting hurt, emotionally, I shut down my emotions. What I was actually mostly doing was just sort of cramming them way down inside, which very definitely is not healthy, and because not only do they eventually come back up and boil over, but you also end up internalizing things and doing quite a lot of damage when it comes to stress-wise, but also it makes it very difficult to turn them back on, as it were. But I've come to realize recently that probably was also just a symptom of my depression. And then one of the symptoms of depression is a lack of desire or ability to care about things, and a lack of passion in things. So I believe that I've always suffered from it as far back pretty much as I can remember. And for a very long time I ignored it. Just with my emotions in general, I internalized things and stuffed it down. But also in part because what you're told to do for mental problems, mental diseases, is that you're told you're supposed to go to therapy and that'll cure everything. Well, when I was a kid, likewise, I was diagnosed with ADD, and back in the 80s, mid 80s, and part of that you have to go see a psychiatrist in order to get some sort of medication prescribed. And so I've gone to therapists. And what I just couldn't, I didn't trust them. I'm very introspective. That's part of being just sort of a solitary person. Also part of depression, in that you're constantly evaluating yourself, and usually the evaluation fails, as it were. So I found it very difficult to open up to a psychiatrist or a therapist or psychologist. I've seen multiple different ones at this point, because it's always very difficult for me to believe that how are they supposed to help me if I know myself better than they do. In my mind, I guess they're supposed to ask the critical questions, a few critical questions, and be able to know what's going on inside me. But unfortunately, like many people with depression, I was just adept at hiding what I was feeling and not showing the people around me how I felt. Or in my case, for a long time, how I didn't feel. So the fact that these people who are supposed to know everything about the way the mind works and the way emotions and that kind of stuff works, they couldn't see through the fact that they couldn't see through the facade that I was putting up. Basically made me not trust them and not believe that they had anything for me. So therapy never really worked well for me. Uh, and so I would end up just going on and suffering in silence. Uh, when I was, so I eventually got off the Ritalin, and many years later, when I was in college, or just out of college, I began to realize that I did have a serious problem about depression. Now, I've never thought of suicide, not really on any serious basis. However, for me, it was always a question of nothing's good enough, nothing really felt right, and always very, very down on myself, especially, and to the point where, while I would never take my own life, I often wondered if I would put up a fight if it ever came down to it, whether it was disease or someone standing there with a gun to my head trying to mug me or something like that. And quite frequently wishing that there was something that would that would cause the end of my life. I know that smoking. I used to smoke cigarettes, and the doctors, of course, told you it's not healthy and you need to quit, and especially since I had mild asthma. But it not only did it not matter to me that it was that it was unhealthy and damaging me, but it was almost it was almost a badge of pride for me. It was something that made me feel good. It actually did make me feel good because, well, another nail in your coffin, as the expression goes. Well, that's what I wanted. It was passive-aggressive suicide. I wasn't actively doing anything to like directly hurt myself on an immediate basis, but my lifestyle, in my case to a much lesser degree, but I know of many people who to a much more active degree, their lifestyle is so damaging and dangerous that although they're not taking a razor blade to their wrist or swallowing an entire bottle of pills in an attempt to commit suicide, what they're doing is still an attempt to end their life. And that, when I was just out of college, I thought again of trying to find help because I was feeling this, and once more it was about therapy. And then again, after I'd gotten married and I had a full-time job, I had health insurance, and that covered mental health. I once again tried to go to therapy, and this time I tried to stick with it. And it made me feel a little bit better, but not really. And by this time I would stop swallowing my emotions, and I was actively letting my emotions out as best as I could. But after a decade or so of swallowing them, that was hard. It's just habit for me at this point to not acknowledge them. And then, of course, there are things in my life which I have reason to be frustrated about or feel sad about, and that never helps the situation. But it didn't. The therapy didn't work, so I just put it off to well, this is just the way I am. Until my son was born, my first son. At which point I had everything that I had always been working towards. I had a full-time job, which was a good job, pays well, great benefits, and I enjoy doing it. I had a wife and a son to carry on my family name, which was pretty much, and I owned my own house, so I had everything that I could really want. And it wasn't worth it. None of it felt right. And that was the depression. And I knew it was the depression. And worse still, the fact that it didn't feel right made me feel even worse. Because I have everything. And this is where no matter how well-meaning, some people end up hurting the people that they're trying to help, because you tell somebody who is suffering from depression, well, look at all the good things that you have in life. Try and focus on the things you have to be thankful for. Well, unfortunately, when somebody is suffering from depression, it doesn't matter. They look at those things and they say, yes, I have all of these wonderful things. So why do I feel bad? Why do I feel like none of this is worth it? None of this makes me happy, and it ends up driving you deeper. So when things are at their best, it actually hurts even more and sends you even deeper. Well, again, this time I tried to talk to my doctors about it, but unfortunately they didn't listen, so I put it off. Every year I would go to my annual physical and say, well, I really think I'm suffering from depression, and so they gave me this checklist of on a scale of 1 to 5, how do you feel about these things, and how often does this happen, and what it boiled down to was that each year I would fill out the form and say, yes, most days I would feel like this. Most days I don't really have the energy to do anything. Most days I don't have the passion to do anything. But in the end, the doctors will pretty much always look at the final question: how often do you think about hurting yourself? And the answer, being truthful, was rarely, or not at all, because that's not me. I'm not the type of person who's going to commit suicide. I'm not the type of person, well, anymore. Long time ago, I used to not actively cut myself, but cause welts and whatnot in order to focus on the physical pain, to ignore the emotional pain. But again, it was because I wasn't actively cutting myself. It was the type of thing that you can hide easily, the type of thing that the people around me wouldn't see, so nobody knew. And I moved past that long since. So the doctor looked at my answers, and there wasn't anything that they weren't worried, because I'm not going to hurt myself, so I'm not a danger. Didn't really matter to them how I felt and how it was affecting my personal standard of living. Yes, I own my own house. I have a great job, and I never have to worry about food on the table. I never have to worry about clothes on my back or where I'm going to live. So my standard of living is great, but my emotional standard of living wasn't, and it wasn't something that they were taking seriously. In fact, they didn't take it seriously until one year I went in and I filled out the form as usual, and this time I left the last question blank. I didn't answer at all. And so when I mentioned the depression again, and so they just sort of took a look at the sheet and okay, went through the questions, because they always, even though they have you write down the answers, they always go through and ask you, and so they were going, yeah, this. Now, how often do you think of committing suicide or hurting yourself? And this is where I finally just said, every day. They stopped and looked at me. It was, and at least I got their attention. And that's the key. You need to get their attention. Because unless you have it down in black and white as every day, or frequently, or whatever the result is, they wouldn't pay any attention to it. And so, by saying every day, which was sort of a half-truth at best, at least I got his attention, and then turned and said, okay, this is what I really mean by that. No, I don't actively try and hurt myself, which would have probably had them lock me up immediately as a danger to myself. But I don't actively want to hurt myself, but I do really want something to happen to me. And while it's a minor distinction, it's no difference when it comes to the depression. And so finally they took me seriously and said, well, have you tried counseling? And I said, many times. How many times? And I ended up, as much as I disliked the concept, I ended up being medicated. Because depression is not just a state of mind. It is not just about whether or not you are happy. It is not just about whether or not you have any passion, any desire to do things. So it's not just a lack of passion. It's not just a lack of emotion. It's not just in your head. Depression, for many people, is a chemical thing. There is a chemical imbalance in your body. If you had too little vitamin D, then a doctor will put you on a regimen of vitamin D. Well, there's something in my brain which is deficient, or more than likely it's deficient, but or there's too much of it, and it's causing what happens. And it needed to be rectified. Now, I am on medication for my depression, and does it make me happy? Am I happy all the time? No, not at all. It is not. Depression medication is not just la 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 la. It is about allowing you to be closer to normal. I'm not happy all the time. I can feel frustration. I can feel sorrow. In fact, I frequently do. I have 2 kids, and as any parent knows, kids can be a big frustration. Kids can make you cry. They'll come up with things that are designed to hurt you, that hurt your feelings. I've had both of my kids look at me in the face and say, "I hate you." that hurts. It's gonna hurt anyone. Um, but the medication allows me to handle it. It allows me to be able to feel sorrow without feeling as if I'm constantly falling, I guess. Like there's a hole in my chest that that nothing can ever fill. And that's what depression was for me. And so for those who fear that the medications that they give you are just designed to make you just a drone, well, I'm still just as bizarre and weird as I've always been. And for those who are afraid that it's going to make you sort of loopy or perpetually happy, perky all the time, no, it's not. Medications for depression just make you able to cope. They don't take away your emotions. They don't really change your emotions. They just let you be able to manage them.